We're back now with South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Good to have you here in person, Senator. You just voted for a short-term deal that doesn't include a cent for Ukraine nor for the U.S. border.
Right.
How did you swallow that?
We had to keep the government open. We got 45 days to fix both problems. I listened to Kevin closely. There will come out of the Senate soon a bill that will have three legs to it. Disaster funding, we need more, not less. Robust funding for Ukraine to get them through the next fighting season, not $24 billion, and a major effort to secure our border. I believe there's bipartisan support in the Senate to do both, and it will go to the House hopefully in the next 30 days.
What the Speaker was talking about, though, was a bill, H.R. 2, regarding the border that Senate Democrats will never get on board.
There will
so
be
what
a
are you talking about?
Right. So we got to fix asylum. We need border security agent increases. We need more detention beds. I think there's Democratic support for major border security reform, but we have to attach it to Ukraine. To those who say we need to fix our border, you're right. To those who say we need to help Ukraine, you're right. To those who say we need to do the border, not Ukraine, you're wrong. The vast majority of Senate Republicans would support a combination of border security, Ukraine funding, and disaster aid.
Mm-hmm. Well, when it comes to the House and the idea that we got to move swiftly, right?
Right.
The White House told Republican leadership that they don't have enough funding for Ukraine to make it through 45 days, and the authorities they have are insufficient.
Yeah. Well,
so how much time are you talking about needing?
You know, I've been around while I'm wearing a pin. Do you think I would leave Ukraine? I don't believe that one bit. This same White House says we don't need F-16s, we don't need HIMARS, we don't need tanks. I've lost confidence in their evaluation of what's going on in Ukraine. We got a bunch of allies. They can help for 6 weeks. The allies have spent more money in Ukraine than we have, and when you hear otherwise, it's just not true. It's been good burden sharing, but I'm not worried about the next 6 weeks. I'm worried about next year. We will produce in the United States Senate Ukraine funding 60 or 70 billion, not 24, to get them through next year. We will have a border security measure that is strong, and we will have additional disaster aid because the nation needs it. We're going to do those three things, and I'm hoping our House colleagues will react positively to it. I think Kevin is the right guy at the right time. The only way he loses his job is if a handful of Republicans join up with the Democratic Party to fire him. That would be a disaster for the future of the Republican Party. That's not going to happen. Kevin has the overwhelming confidence of his membership. He worked to avoid a shutdown. He will help Ukraine, but he's telling everybody in the country, including me, you better send something over for the border for me to help Ukraine, and he's right to make that demand.
Understand, but you're talking about, to be clear, a supplemental bigger than $24 billion for Ukraine, and that's going to pass in 45 days.
Oh, absolutely. You know why? Because we need it. We haven't lost one soldier in the Ukraine. We spent less than 5% of our military budget. 50% of the Russian army has been destroyed by the Ukrainians. They would be at Crimea already if the administration hadn't been so slow in giving weapons.
And we dedicate a lot of time to Ukraine on this program, so we find it important. But I want to ask you, because Leader McConnell had gone into the lunch yesterday telling Senate leaders that he believed the White House when they said they were running out of funding for Ukraine, and then his deputies apparently urged him to drop it, which is how you ended up with this bill with nothing in it for Ukraine. Is he in control of the caucus?
Senator McConnell's been great in Ukraine, but he picked a formula to lose votes for Ukraine. To expect people like me and others to vote for Ukraine aid without border security is unreasonable. Mitch made a miscalculation. He's been great on Ukraine. I told him 1,000 times, the key to Ukraine funding is to deal with a broken border. 107,000 Americans have died from fentanyl poisoning, from fentanyl coming across the southern border. We haven't lost one soldier in Ukraine. So America is being invaded from a broken southern border. To my Democratic colleagues, you need to take border security seriously.
Yeah. Are you saying that Ukraine should not be a standalone? It has to be.
It will not be a standalone. When I go to South Carolina, I openly talk about helping Ukraine. If you let Putin get away with this, you have a bigger war. Well, what about our border? I promise people in South Carolina, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to help secure our border and keep the fight going in Ukraine. to make sure that Putin doesn't get away with this.
Have you asked Donald Trump, your friend, to come out and publicly support more aid to Ukraine and to push some of these skeptical members of the Republican conference?
I'll leave it up to him to what to do, but he wanted to get out of Afghanistan.
Well, Vladimir Putin has been praising him for his comments about Russia and Ukraine.
Here's what I'll say about President Trump. He did not pull the plug on Afghanistan, even though he wanted to. The biggest mistake we made since the war on terror is withdrawing from Afghanistan. To President Trump and anybody else, if we pull the plug on Ukraine, that's 10 times worse than Afghanistan. There goes Taiwan. To stop funding Ukraine is a death sentence for Taiwan. Putin will keep going. You missed all of World War II if you don't know how this movie ends. To the Republicans who say Ukraine doesn't matter to us, you're wrong. Respectfully, you're wrong. The war gets bigger, not smaller. There goes Taiwan. If Ukraine can beat Russia, China's less likely to invade Taiwan, and Putin gets stopped.
I need to take a break here, but we have more to talk about with you, Senator. You will. Senator Graham's going to stay with us, and we're going to talk about the legacy as well of Senator Dianne Feinstein on the other side of that break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We turn now to the life and the legacy of California Senator Dianne Feinstein, who died late last week.
Women are seen as spear throwers of change. We're not the same thing repeating itself.
Then Senate candidate Dianne Feinstein first appeared on Face the Nation in 1992.
Ms. Feinstein, is gender a plus or a minus for you?
There's so many men back there, and we don't see anything happening.
The Californian was a pioneer, winning her seat in the year of the woman. The Senate went from 2 female lawmakers to 6. Feinstein said it was the first time she felt her gender wasn't a negative for voters. When she was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1969, there weren't many women in public office. Feinstein became the first female mayor of the city following the assassination of 2 of her colleagues.
Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
She never forgot that experience and championed gun laws, including the 1994 assault weapons ban, when she reached the Senate.
I am quite familiar with firearms. I became mayor as a product of assassination.
I'm aware of that.
I found my assassinated colleague and put a finger through a bullet hole.
Though it expired 10 years later, her passionate campaign continued.
Let me talk about rights for a minute. Does a child have a right to be safe in school? Does a law client, when he goes into a law firm, have a right to believe he's safe? Does a shopper in a mall have a right to believe that she's safe? I think so.
That position put her at odds with conservatives. But she became a deal-making centrist, an increasingly rare breed in Washington, and at times challenged her own party.
This is not what Americans do.
As the first woman to head the powerful Intelligence Committee, she sparred with the CIA director and accused the agency of trying to cover up its past abuse of terror suspects.
We're supposed to be better than that we don't have to torture people.
America, she argued, is big enough to admit when it is wrong and should be confident enough to learn from its mistakes. Being a pioneer wasn't easy, as she told Bob Schieffer in 2009.
We women have had to fight for everything we've gotten in the public arena. We weren't given the right to vote. We had to fight for it.
Today, women make up a quarter of the Senate, following a path she helped to forge. Senator Graham was one of the Republicans, as you saw there in that piece, who worked with Senator Feinstein actually quite closely on the Judiciary Committee.
Loved her. She was great. When I first got to the Senate, somebody told me, now I'll protect their name here, if you want to get anything done, see if you can get Ted Kennedy and or Dianne Feinstein to help you. Because if they got on your bill or your idea, the people in the Democratic caucus would listen. If Ted was the lion, she was the lioness. She could move votes. She knew how to get to yes on controversial things. She was always kind. She was always prepared. She was a defense hawk. She was socially liberal. She was my friend. I miss her. And if you're looking for a role model in politics as a young man or woman, look to her life.
You know, there is also that image of her embracing you after that very contentious hearing. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and she was criticized from within her own party for praising how you conducted yourself. How do you think about that now?
Well, that says more about the current state of affairs than Diane. Diane was saying nice things. We had like a 5-second hug, and because she wanted to say something nice about me, they thought she had to be off the committee. That's what's wrong with Diane. Wasn't the problem. She was the solution. And there are people on my side. It goes both ways. So let's just do this. Let's reflect on a well-lived life. America's better for Diane Feinstein having served our country. California's better for it. And we lost a lot. We just didn't lose a person. We lost an idea. And I want to my contribution is to try to reinvigorate the idea. It's okay to be tough and kind. It's okay to be liberal or conservative, but it's even more okay to work for America. And that's what she did. We've lost a lot with Diane. So the rest of us, we're going to have to up our game.
Before I let you go, I want to quickly ask you, she was also an outspoken proponent of abortion access rights.
She was.
Are you going to reintroduce your bill limiting it to 15 weeks of access, which has kind of become a litmus test for a lot of these presidential candidates?
Yeah,
Donald Trump has not signed on. He said he didn't like 15 weeks.
My bill has exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. 47 or 50 European nations limit abortions from 12 to 15 weeks. 15 weeks, the baby can suck its thumb and feel pain. I will introduce that bill. I want America to be like the civilized world, not China or North Korea. It's a debate worthy of a great country to have this debate, and we will have it.
Senator Graham, thank you for your time.
You.
We'll be back in a moment. We turn now to the former Secretary of Defense under President Trump and author of A Sacred Oath, Mark Esper. Good to have you back with us today. You know,
Morning,
we are having conversations about just how politically difficult basic matters of governance are in Washington. And I wonder what sign you think that sends to our adversaries around the world.
Well, thank you, Margaret, for having me on this morning. First, let me also salute Diane Feinstein as we mourn her passing. She was a real leader in the Senate. You know, at times she would buck her party. She could reach across the aisle. She was a real leader from my time on Capitol Hill, and we're going to miss her, and we need more people like her. So, again, my condolences and my salute out to her. Look, on your question with regard to what our allies see, Vladimir Putin sits in Russia today, and he looks across the landscape, and he sees the United States of America, which is unwilling to spend what it needs to on defense. It is now pulling back spending for Ukraine. We've seen successive Republican votes where more and more Republicans vote against funding for Ukraine. He sees coups in Africa. They're pushing Western militaries out. He has a sympathetic Serbia that's massing troops on the border of Kosovo. We had a vote today in Slovakia, a NATO ally in Central Europe, that just picked a prime minister who is pro-Russian and has promised to cut spending for Ukraine. Look, from his vantage point, the West is fracturing, and he's going to continue to wait out the clock and maybe hope that Donald Trump returns to the presidency.
I wanted to ask you specifically about that because in your book you write extensively about your frustration with getting then President Trump to support aid to Ukraine, and that was before the full-scale invasion. That was when Russian troops were just in the east of that country. He still, to this day, is not coming out in support of aid to Ukraine. And as we just talked about, Vladimir Putin has said some of the comments he's made make him happy. What does that mean in terms of what we should expect if there is a second Trump presidency?
Well, I suspect that he will do what he says, and that is he will come to office. He will somehow attempt to negotiate a deal between Russia and Ukraine, and that won't fly. There's only one person that can end this conflict in Ukraine, and that's Vladimir Putin, and he's not about to do that anytime soon. So I suspect Trump will quickly move to end funding for Ukraine, and then at some point he's also going to move to withdraw funding for NATO and maybe even pull out of NATO, which would be disastrous for the United States national security. So for all those reasons, that concerns me. And then, of course, we could talk about our allies and partners in Asia as well, who will equally be concerned about these type of events.
So, I mean, you're clear you're not supporting the former president's bid to return to office, but, you know, the governor of Florida, also presidential candidate, has raised his personal objections to, you know, limitless checks as well. So do you like any of the Republican candidates right now?
Well, first, let me say there should not be any blank checks for Ukraine, right? And everything we provide should be audited and accounted for. That's just good government. But look, on the bigger question, look, I'm disappointed in some of my party who are not picking up the mantle of Ronald Reagan. I consider myself a Reagan Republican. Ronald Reagan would definitely support these young fledgling democracies, whether it's Ukraine in Europe, which is being invaded by its larger, bigger dictatorial neighbor, or Taiwan in Asia that's being intimidated and threatened by China. Mm-hmm. That's what Ronald Reagan stands for. Look, I think I think there are a few Republicans in the debates right now who I could support, who are better certainly than Trump, and who could beat President Biden. And I think for Republicans, we got to quickly find that person, rally around them, and then bring the party together and run a strong candidate.
You want to give me a name?
Look, I think we've seen some good performances from Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, DeSantis, Tim Scott. I think there are 3 or 4 or 5, but the Republican voters need to decide who that is. It's not Donald Trump, but I think there are a number of good candidates out there.
I mean, you've made clear you see President Trump as a threat to democracy, not just a flawed candidate, a threat to democracy, you've said. Upon his retirement last week, General Mark Milley, an ally of yours during your time in office, appeared to refer to him in his farewell speech as a wannabe dictator. Is that overstating things? A dictatorship?
Well, look, if you go back the week prior, Donald Trump said that Milley, for his behavior, whatever he thought that should be punished, and he talked about execution, which was completely unfair. Mark Milley served this country honorably for 40-plus years in war and peace, moved, dragged his family around 20-plus times. He deserves our respect and admiration, and not that type of talk. No less coming from the Commander-in-Chief, the former Commander-in-Chief. So look, I have a lot of concerns about Donald Trump. I have said that he's a threat to democracy. I think the last year, certainly the last few months of Donald Trump's presidency will look like the first few months of the next one, if that were to occur.
There are a number of stalled military promotions in the Senate, talking about problems with democracy right now. Are you disappointed that even in Congress, Republican leadership hasn't been able to clear that hurdle and get the caucus in line to say that some of the highest ranking military officers in our country should get the jobs that they've been nominated for?
Yeah, look, I'm concerned on a few levels. Look, first of all, I think Senator Tuberville's serious about his concerns over the policy issues. He's had a chance to bring him up for a vote and declined to do that. And I think it's unfair to hold military nominees, over 300 now, hostage, if you will, over a policy issue for which that's not their responsibility. That's a civilian responsibility. And so my view is that that should not happen. It's happened in the past by both parties. And I've called on recently Senator Schumer to start moving nominations, which he has, because otherwise it looks like both parties are politicizing the military. That's my institutional concern. And then, Margaret, if you step back, you ask yourself, look, the Chinese government doesn't shut down. The Chinese government doesn't do continuing resolutions. And they certainly don't hold up their admirals and generals when they need them as they prepare for potential conflict with the United States. We just look really dysfunctional, and we're harming our own readiness in the process when we look across the international environment.
Mark Esper, thank you for your analysis today. We'll be right back. We're joined now by the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus, Pennsylvania Republican Brian Fitzpatrick and New Jersey Democrat Josh Gottheimer. Good to have you both with us, and we got a lot of problems that you do need to solve. I want to start on what we just learned in the course of this program, which was Speaker McCarthy coming out and seeming to link some movement on the border to his willingness to move a Ukraine funding bill. Then you heard Lindsey Graham say how that would go down, or he wants it to go down in the Senate. He called it a three-legged stool. Would you get on board with what Graham proposed?
I would. I think we have a lot of challenges. I think we need to address all of them. It's actually consistent with the problem solver framework that we introduced last week. It addressed keeping our government open. It addressed Ukraine. It addressed our border. And expiring authorities. We dealt with several of them in the continuing resolution that passed, thankfully, yesterday. But there are remaining items that are unaddressed, the border and Ukraine being two of them.
But the border proposal that has passed, the HR2 that Speaker McCarthy talked about would not go anywhere in the Democratic Senate.
That's not going anywhere. I mean, but I think to Brian's point, we have to address both, and I think it's a false choice to say we're going to do one or the other.
Right.
Like, clearly, we know that we can make it the next 45 days to support Ukraine and make sure we stand up to Putin and to China and Iran, which is critical to our national security and to our allies. But also, we need to make sure that we deal with and deal with the challenges at the border and border security and live up to our values there. Right.
What Graham laid out, though, was not just funding for Ukraine. It was, I mean, almost a year's worth of funding for Ukraine. Can you get that done in 45 days?
Well, I think we can't. We know that we can get through the next 45 days, but it's a matter of days and weeks, and not months and years in terms of what we have available to make sure that Ukraine has what they need to stand up to Putin in his dictatorial march. So I think we have to make sure that we get some legislation to the floor quickly. I know the Speaker is open to that. He signaled that he's open to that. I think that's key. And but we have other challenges, and we can do more than one thing at once.
And I do think the Ukraine funding should be for a longer period of time. It should be for a year. It sends the right message to Ukraine, sends the right message to Russia. And it's perhaps, I think, the best solution inside our chamber to get that done. And the border security language, just so you know, in our framework was a bipartisan bill. It was Kirsten Sinema and Tom Tillis's bill in the Senate, myself, Jared Golden in the House. It's a two-party solution of the border. It represents the intersection of where the two parties agree.
And you think you can get the Speaker on board to consider
I'm going to work hard. Yep.
You also heard today the call, a motion to vacate, to oust Speaker McCarthy from leadership. He says he can survive. Can he?
Yes. To me, what's going to be put on the floor is a choice. Are we going to reward bipartisan bills being put on the floor, or are we going to punish them? That is a choice. Substitute out Kevin McCarthy's name for Hakeem Jeffries or anyone else. If the situation were reversed and the squad tried to do the same to Hakeem Jeffries, should he be Speaker at some point, I can tell you what I would do on the first and 100th vote. I would vote to table it. Because I don't think that sends the right message. I think what we need to do is encourage bipartisanship, encourage two-party solutions to be brought to the floor. That's what we need. And to do the opposite would really be rewarding this Hatfield versus McCoy brand of politics that's destroying our nation.
Gates says he's going to keep coming, and he can, right? Only one vote needed for a motion to vacate.
And that may require a change in the rules package. I mean, this cannot be the trajectory for the remainder of the Congress.
To stop one person from being able to.
Correct. I mean, that was, so keep in mind.
That was how Speaker McCarthy got to the leadership. That was one of the promises he made.
That was one of the changes that was made, but we were given assurances that was never going to be used, that it was a matter of principle that it remained at one. So you can't have it both ways. And 90% plus of the American public does not want us to be voting on a motion to vacate every day for the rest of the term.
Is he going to get Democrats?
Sounds like Brian was open to Hakeem there. I don't know.
But are Democrats going to join Gates? He needs to get 218 votes.
The way I look at this, you've got a civil war raging in the Republican caucus, and as it has been since the beginning, right? With extremists trying to take out common sense, and they keep doing it time and again. And so I'll leave that to Brian. That's their caucus, and I'm from Jersey. We don't mess with other people's families, and so I'll leave it to them. But I'll tell you what we're very open to from a policy front. We continue to do this, as you saw yesterday, as you saw the debt ceiling. If there's bipartisan ideas brought to the table, we're always going to be at that table negotiating in good faith. That's what the Problem Solvers Caucus does. It's how we got yesterday done, right? If you remember, that's how yesterday happened. You had every Democrat plus one help cover for the 91 Republicans they lost. We all came together for the good of the country to stop a government shutdown and make sure we help people and help families. That's the kind of stuff we should be sitting at a table about negotiating in good faith, and we'll continue to do that.
Republicans have shown they can't govern on their own. Fair?
I've seen the only way these things are getting done is with Democrats, right? So, in bipartisan governing. And that's good for the country. People want us to put the country over party.
So can you say we won't be back in the same place November 17th talking about a possible government shutdown?
Well, we're 2 out of 435, so we're not in a position to make that prediction. What we can say, like we said last Sunday on a show that Josh and I appeared together, we will do whatever it takes to keep the government open. We made that pledge. We were prepared to take drastic action yesterday. Had that not passed the floor.
What do you mean?
We will do, well, there are a number of mechanisms where we could force a floor vote on our two-party solution.
Okay.
There are options for us to do it. We were prepared to do it. Thankfully, that's one of many. Thankfully, we didn't have to go there, but we will do what it takes to make sure the lights are on in the United States government, for sure.
And I think the point is we're going to work around the clock these next 45 days. But this cycle of insanity has to stop, and that's what Brian and I believe, right? We need long-term solutions. We can't keep doing this and wasting our time. We have real challenges in the country.
And this includes the debt ceiling as well. We cannot be constantly on the 11th hour of brinksmanship.
That's why we were behind that deal.
It's not even the debt ceiling. The FAA is going to be authorized.
100%.
You haven't passed into law a defense bill.
Yep.
These are the most basic
the extremists,
things.
you saw how we got here. These ultra-right-wing extremists keep fighting against reasonableness and common sense. They refused to vote for the defense bill, right? Multiple times they kept trying to take it down.
Yep.
And that's the point. That's why you need bipartisan solutions right now in this Congress. It's the only way we're going to be able to govern.
The extremists are the problem in this country. It's the bipartisan moderates that are the solution. That's what we believe in.
And you have a proposal to get all of this
100%.
done in 45 days.
We introduced our bill last Friday.
Yep.
It's the only bipartisan bill. It's equal co-sponsors, Democrat and Republican, represents where the intersection of the United States of America is. And that's what our country wants. They want us to approach government the same way we approach our personal relationships.
But then you heard, I mean, as we were talking about with Senator Graham, I mean, I asked him about Donald Trump. He still won't come out and support Ukraine aid. You have other presidential candidates wavering on
He called for the government to shut down.
So
President Trump.
Yes.
Right.
So if people are governing by popularity polls and not by the mandate that you say you feel you have, how do you solve that? I mean, these
I can tell you the overwhelming majority of
Congress.
I can tell you the overwhelming majority of Americans support the approach that Josh and I take. You approach government the same way you approach your personal relationships. You don't allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. You take 80% of something rather than 100% of nothing. You come to the center, you build consensus, and you move forward. That's how all of us operate our lives. Mm-hmm. It's this loud, noisy fringe, the Hatfield versus McCoy saber rattlers, that get all the attention, but that's not where most of the American people are. That's why Josh get attacked from the left and the right every day.
Do you think Speaker McCarthy learned the lesson that you
100%, and I think, yes. I mean, yesterday was Exhibit A, and I hope that's a breaking point.
We have a 5-seat majority. That's all they have. The only way we're going to get stuff done for the country is by us working together. That's the only way, as we're seeing.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We'll be back in a moment. There's a big birthday celebration in Georgia this weekend for our 39th president. Mark Strassman has the details.
Happy birthday to you. They're celebrating a birthday in Tiny Plains, Georgia.
Grab a cupcake.
Jimmy Carter's birthplace 99 years ago today.
Get down there and hang out as a family, you know, just be a really small private event. He can't party like he used to for his 99th birthday. So
none of us can.
Right, none of us can. That's exactly right.
I love you, Jimmy Carter. Happy birthday.
Americans celebrate with him.
Amen.
The famous
and happy birthday, President Carter.
And the everyday.
99.
A Jimmy Carter peanut gallery of well-wishers. The White House wooden cake, 39 candles for the 39th president. It's some salute, considering most Americans alive today were born after Jimmy Carter left the White House in 1981 and moved back here to Plains.
He's like the father of the town. He's the heart of the town. And we just celebrate him every day.
When Carter entered hospice back in February, his family thought he had days to live. 7 months later, he's earned all this birthday fuss.
He's modest, and but you know, he smiles. He likes the attention.
He's proud of it.
He's very proud of it.
Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, now married 77 years, will celebrate the day as true Southerners with family, fried chicken, and caramel cake, his favorite.
They've gotten to experience this outpouring of support over these last several months that has really been gratifying.
And we also want to wish President Carter a happy birthday from all of us here at Face the Nation. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.